Welcome, everyone, to No Talking Points Unfiltered with Brian Storseth. I want to thank everyone for being here today. We got a great panel of guests with us. I'm very excited to get into this conversation surrounding encampments, homelessness, mental health. These are all very important issues that I would say some of the most important that are going on in our communities these days. And uh, we've got a great host with us with Barbara Patricino from Queen's Park Briefing. I want to thank Mayor Alex Nuttall from the great city of Barrie and Mayor Dan Carter from the city of Oshawa. It is great to have you guys here. And
It's got to
Dan,
be great city of Oshawa.
I tried to
If
think
great
something
city of
better
Barrie
than
is going to be
great, and it couldn't come out, So
He
thank you
clearly
guys
doesn't know Oshawa well.
We always lose when the kids go play hockey in Oshawa, where we beat Barrie all the time, Dan. So it's how it goes. Today's topic, Dan, you've got an incredible story to tell, and I don't want to tell your story for you, but I think before we jump into the issue of encampments and homelessness, getting some of your background from you, I think would be a great place to start.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to be able to join you today. And poor Alex is going to hear this again. And I do apologize about that, but I'll try and shorten everything up as much as I possibly can. I always say that all of us don't get out of this life unscathed. I didn't learn that till I was older. And what I did realize in 2000 is that maybe I wasn't being punished. Maybe I was being prepared for something. And I find that now with my maturity and what I've gone through is maybe I'm able to put it in a place where it makes sense to me and hopefully it helps others. But, like many of us that find ourselves either in the grips of addiction or mental health challenges or homelessness, many times it's because of the darkness and the challenges that we've had in our lives and the events that have happened in our lives that we have found ourselves one way or another seeing us in the grips of addiction. And in my circumstances, I was born in the 60s, the last of 7 children. My mother died when I was only a couple months old, put into the Children's Aid Society for a couple of years. I was fortunate enough to get adopted by the Carter family. They had 3 kids of their own. Went off to school as, like my brothers and sisters. I went to school in the 60s, but I had a severe learning disability and that was not diagnosed. And that became a real issue in regards to isolation and a lot of bullying and a lot of things that went on there. I always said that by the time I got to grade 4, I went down to the principal to talk to him about a parking space because apparently I was going to be driving to school pretty soon. So that's how bad of a student I was. I was really poor at it. But then when I was about 7 years old, growing up in Toronto and eastern part, I was raped as a 7-year-old and never spoke about it until I was about 31. And then in 1974, my brother Michael, that was a police officer, was killed. And he was a father of 3. And that really started my journey down with alcohol first, and then, of course, alcohol and drugs. And because I am an addict, it starts off giving me all the things that I dreamed about, which was to be charismatic, good looking, charming, and all those kind of things. And by the end of my drinking and drug career, I was mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, and spiritually broken. I found myself, I'm 6'2", 225, and by the time I seeked assistance or help being so broken, I was about 100 living on the streets, and my sister Maureen was able to intervene and gave me a choice, either sober up or die. And I was fortunate enough to get into a long-term program. And, coming out of the program, I was very fortunate. And again, this is a very condensed kind of storyline, but in May of 2000, my sister that saved my life ended her life through suicide. And that was devastating for me. And it was another hurdle that I had faced. And it affects me even today. Families and individuals that have been impacted by suicide, I always tell you, it never leaves you. And it always has a lingering effect. So my interpretation for the longest period of time is, why was I being punished? And it finally came to a realization through some guidance and some help that maybe I wasn't being punished, maybe I was being prepared. And I have a better understanding today of, because of those issues, my learning disability, my mental health issues, being raped as a child, losing siblings through that process, living on the streets, being mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, and spiritually broken, that in the role that I had as a broadcaster before, and now as the role as an elected official, maybe these events help me be the person I am today. And hopefully my experience and my passion behind it then adds to the lives that are still suffering out there on the streets. And I hope, Brian, I've kind of capsulized a little bit about it. But to be absolutely honest, I'm still the luckiest person around. And I wish no one to go through this journey, but I am grateful for what I've been given and the opportunity has been given. I'm grateful for the people that have shown forgiveness and kindness, compassion, and given me the opportunity to recover and have redemption. So I'm very, very fortunate as I sit in front of you today.
Wow, then I'm so sorry you went through this, and thank you for sharing all that. I guess the question is more like, how is it for you to have this experience and then, be in a position now, in a leadership position where you have to deal with homeless in your community? Does it help? Does it make it harder? Like, how is it for you?
So it's a really interesting question. And it's funny, you'll look over my shoulder here and I have two photographs of Martin Luther King. And Dr. King played a significant role in my life, especially because of not only the way that he was so committed in regards to something he was very passionate about, but how he was such a great orator and inspired millions of people. And the reason why I point to that is because when I saw Barack Obama get elected, I saw him and I saw King, and I expected Obama to be king. And Obama wasn't king, Obama was Obama. When I got elected, headlines across the country said, homeless man becomes mayor. And I had to clarify everybody, like I wasn't homeless at the time they asked me to run for mayor. Like, just want to make sure that that's clear. But there was an expectation because I'm a recovering alcoholic and drug addict and that I lived on the streets and I dealt with mental health, that I was going to be the fixer of all and that I was able to bring a knowledge to the table and be able to change the equation that we were facing. There was a lot of, and still is, a great deal of expectation on me to fix it. And the complexities of today's mental health and addiction and the drugs that are out there are not that easy. And as we've seen across this country, it's affecting our whole nation, not only here in Canada, but North America.
Right.
So it does put a lot of pressure on you because people, when you govern, and Alex will be able to speak to this, is understand we're compassionate people, but we also have roles and responsibilities of upholding the law, the bylaws, and representing all of the people. That's our fiduciary duty. But we never lose the component of being compassionate. And because we're compassionate, we want to see people get better, not worse. And that's why in many circumstances, we have to take hard lines in regards to the well-being of these individuals because they're unable to make good decisions for themselves. But it is hard on me and based upon what the public expects of me. They expect me to fix it. I should know better. I shouldn't be that hard on people. And, I should be bringing a different lens to it.
And I guess, and now bringing Alex to the question, to the conversation as well, and Brian, feel free to jump in as well. But why was it so hard for you to fix things? And both of you guys, you both have been so outspoken about this issue, right? Like even going after the provincial government for tools to actually being able to do whatever you need to do. So can you just guide me? I know we've talked about this a lot of times. Can you just guide me through the process of, like recognizing the issue? When exactly was that you guys realized that this was like getting out of control, out of hand? And why was it that it was so hard to deal with that, to respond?
Alex.
Well, I think there's a number of aspects to that, Barbara, in the sense that, we all have the same issue, but we face it differently because of our governance structures and the way that our relationships work with upper tiers of government. As you know, you were there. We were appealing to the premier to make some moves on homelessness and shelter and rehabilitative services, which are actually, I think, seen come now through the system with the hard hubs. But it was not an easy start to this subject because there's so many forces working in so many different directions on it. And the reality is that the municipal governments, like our city governments, can't make up for failure in the justice system. They can't make up for failure in the Mental Health Act. And so, while we shoulder it on the municipal level, like you're never going to be able to meet the day on the issues. I think, Dan, maybe if you want to explain what you did in Oshawa and how you continue to do things, and then, I can come back on why and how we did the Emergency Act.
I think to Alex's point, is it's been a difficult journey because what happens is two things. One is those that are very committed socially look at this as a human rights issue. And I think that makes it even more complex. When did it start? Well, we can go back almost 20 years to be able to see the Western wave, where it started and how it's come into Ontario. And now it continues to move, of course, eastward across our nation. And the complexities of I don't think many of us understood Western Canada was facing in regards to the toxicity of drugs and the complexities of the mental health component that was mixed in, until we actually had seen it come to our communities. I can speak on our behalf. In April of 2020, I had 45 people on the streets. We have 700 now.
Oh my
So it really has taken a different component to it. But where the complexities happen is where those that are fighting for the protection of human rights feel that there is no position other than protecting one's human rights, and that anything that goes against human rights is a violation, and therefore government doesn't have a role. I'm of a different opinion. My opinion is that, and I'll speak for myself, and I know Alex comes very much to the same conclusion, is we are committed in regards to preserving life. We want to see people go from their worst day to their best day. And what we want to try and do is do everything we possibly can to make sure that these individuals get the right care at the right time with the right support so that they can get onto the right pathways. Just like I benefited because of compassion, because somebody intervened, because I was so ill and I couldn't make the right decisions for myself. I needed someone else to make that decision to help me. So that's where some of the fighting happens. Second of all is, we look at this and say to ourselves, over the last, 7 or 8 years, we've lost almost 70,000 people to an opiate poisoning or a drug toxicity across this country. At one point, are we going to get really, really serious at it? And I think that that's where our frustration is. We have continued to see the issue get worse, but we don't have the mechanisms or the proper resources to be able to address it in the best possible way. And that's just kind of a snippet, but the reality being is I hear people, and I'll give you a fast example, Barbara. And so we have, every time we go to somebody that is VSA, vital signs absent, and it happens in Alex's community, we have our fire, our bylaw, our security, EMS, and of course, police come on arrival. The person has no vital signs. The person is technically not alive. They hit them with naloxone. Under human rights, that's a violation of their human rights. We don't have their permission. If somebody is standing on a bridge, we don't drive by. We stop because we want to preserve life. When somebody is freezing in a tent, Alex and myself find it unacceptable that we stand by and just say, well, it's a human right and that's okay. And that's where it gets difficult, because those that are so committed in regards to protecting human rights don't, in many circumstances, their passion is there, but the reasoning about what are we trying to do? Are we trying to save somebody's life, or are we trying to protect them because they don't have the opportunity to be able to absorb what's best for them right now? And by the way, there's lots of studies out there that talk about the influence that alcohol and drugs has on one's brain, and how it is unreasonable for us because of our sickness to make proper decisions at the proper time. So us that are charged with those duties, we should do everything we possibly can to save their lives.
I think what Dan's saying here is there's such a focus on the philosophy of human right to be where I am right now, how I am, that we've lost as society the idea of protecting human life. So the idea of protecting human rights over human life is one that has been prevalent for the last decade, but that's changing. We see it in governments over and over again. It's starting to come back to what I believe is the center, which is a place where you can actually help them get an intervention, get the rehabilitative services, not the 1 day or 3 day that we see happening at hospitals in Ontario, but actually getting 30, 60, 90 days, a year of supportive housing, and then off into other forms of housing, because you can't undo the damage that these drugs are doing, in some cases at all. But you definitely can't undo this damage in a 72-hour or a 7-day scenario. These are going to take months and months and months in order to be able to help them rehabilitate and move forward.
It took me a year. It took me a year
And that's
to be
impressive.
able to not only recover from alcohol and drugs, but actually be able to have the coping mechanisms to deal with life on life's basis, but also then to be able to properly have the life skills to be able to address the challenges that I'm going to face throughout my whole life. And my background is not as dark as some that are so dark that you can't even imagine. You can't fix that in 90 days. And we focus too many times just on helping them overcome alcoholism or drug addiction. We need to think about the life issues that they've been facing.
So what is it
Now-
right now that is lacking? Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
Sorry, I just wanted to bring this back, Barbara, to where Mayor Nuttall was when he invoked the Emergency Act, and walk me through how the Emergency Act gets you to the point where you are helping these people for more than 30, 60, 90 days.
Well, look, I think that there's a few things, and Dan, now I get to say the same thing back to you. I'm sorry you have to listen to this whole substantiation again. First of all, I think what the Emergency Act did for us was it just stated the problem that existed in a very real, easy to understand way. We labeled it what it was, which was there is an emergency inside of our city with relation to individuals overdosing, living in encampments, and the crime that's happening in and around those encampments, and the victims that are in and around those encampments. You know, when you look for the highest levels of sexual assault, that's where it is. When you look for the highest violent crimes, that's where they are. When you look for the highest drug use, that's where it's happening. And for us, it was just about getting out and labeling it what it was, which is an emergency. And that's a position I've held for going on 7 years. But what it did on a governance perspective was it allowed us to bring all those services underneath the emergency management team of the city of Barrie, where we had 0 beds or 1 bed open a day throughout the summer. Once we declared it on September 9th, we had a promise all of a sudden of 160 beds coming from the county to be able to then move those individuals who are in encampments into care. And so what you've seen since about August, call it 1st or 2nd or 3rd, till now, is an emergency from the police force due to a double murder and homicide and a dismemberment of bodies. Then there was an emergency by the province of Ontario stating there was an environmental emergency under the Environmental Act that basically said, look, there's all of this waste. This waste is going in our waterways everywhere around the ground. We don't know where fentanyl is or isn't, or drugs are or not. And so we need to deal with that. And so from the police emergency, went to a provincial environmental emergency, and then the declaration of the state of emergency. And we now have removed every large encampment in the city of Barrie, where those encampments together would have been, call it 150 to 165 tents and building structures. We're now down to 0 inside of those. Where we do have some is it's broken off into some smaller pieces. So you get 1s and 2s kind of here and there. And we're still working to get those people into care. But if you only offer the care and you don't have any expectation of what security and safety look like in your city, people in this situation, unfortunately, are choosing to live on the street. So you have to both set that expectation on safety and security, which we all expect, and provide the help and support so these individuals can get help. And that's where we found, it's the sweet spot.
So what was the result of this? What was the result of this for the individuals who were in the encampments?
Yeah, so the initial ones, what we saw was encampments moving to other places. So we saw when the police moved in, the encampments got much worse in front of our courthouse. And certainly there was a lot of work done by the county and their folks to provide outreach services, to provide supportive services, to get them into a better place. It wasn't until we actually declared a full state of emergency that we saw a very good pickup. So up until last week, I don't have the numbers from last week, which was our final encampment, we were sitting somewhere around 82%. Recognizing that the people who didn't want to get help were all now moving to this final encampment last week. And so I think we'll have a reducing success rate now at this point, where all of the low-hanging fruit that we could get in to help get into rehab, get food, on the plate and a roof over one's head. We've been able to move there. Now I think that we're going to have a little bit more difficult time with the final folks. Let's say it's the final 10 or 15, 20%, something like that. And we're doing our best, and we're still offering those services. The county's still doing all of what they're doing, but I think that you're going to see that it'll start to taper off a bit. But it's been huge. In fact, we've already now got graduates out of the Heart Hub program, rehab program, a couple that were both using, went in to detox, pre-detox actually, then detox, then went into rehab for 60 days. And believe it or not, those 2 individuals are now living in supportive housing and both working full-time jobs.
Wow.
So that's the path back that I think we all as a society and a communities, we want to see.
Do you like, when you see the situation and all the stories and all the things and how hard it was to clean the encampments as well, do you feel like there's anything else the province could do to help out?
Well, Dan, I'm going to turn that question over to you because I want you to talk about the Mental Health Act, and I want you to talk about some of the ideas you've got on making sure that the rehabilitative services and the capacities there.
Yeah, and thank you so much for giving me the easy question. I really appreciate that. So that's what friendship looks like, by the way. I love you, buddy. We stand firm in regards to compassionate intervention, and we know that Marshall Smith and others in Alberta are trying to do everything they possibly can. We've got some preliminary numbers across Ontario of the kind of beds that we need in facilities. They number astronomical. What we would need, about 33 centers across Ontario, maybe 3,000 beds you're looking at. I mean, it's quite an undertaking. But I think that there's some first steps. I think one is that what we said is, let's have a continuum of care. And I think Alex has said it quite well in regards to the steps that they took. How do we take people from their worst day to the best day? And what does that pathway look like? So making sure that if we're going to take somebody out of those environments, what are we putting them into and how are we supporting them and how are we getting them on the right path? I've said this to our colleagues, and I'll set it to the Premier and the Minister of Health and anybody else that'll listen. This is going to be labor intense. It's going to be expensive, but it'll be a better outcomes if we're able to actually put a plan together. So I think that that's a big part of it. Right at this particular time, I can only speak in my community. We don't have mechanisms to get people into the right care at the right time. Many times we take them up to the hospital. They sit in a traditional emergency room anywhere between 2 and 13 hours. We've proposed taking an existing space, making it very much only an addiction and mental health emergency ward. They would be taken there, keep them out of the emergency ward, teamed up with CAMH to have experts on site 24 hours a day. That also, we're saying that has to team up with beds, and we've worked with the development community to be able to make supportive units also available. So there is a continuum of care that we're speaking of. The Mental Health Act has to be looked at and see how it can be modernized and how we're doing the things that are necessary to be able to protect those that can't make the right decisions. And I think that those are some of the basic kind of steps that we have to take. I know that OBCM and under what Alex is doing, not only in Barrie, but in his role with OBCM, we're really trying to bring solutions to the table. We're not saying to the province, fix it. We're saying we're living it. We've got expertise that we can help with, but we believe that it has to be a continuum of care all the way through. We do it in every other circumstance, don't we? If somebody comes in and they're diabetic, we put a plan together. If somebody has a heart condition, we have a care plan. We need to do the same in regards to this, I believe, the most complex health issue this country's ever faced. And I think those are simple things that we can do. We need this changes in the Mental Health Act so that we can intervene when necessary. We need to introduce compassionate intervention. We need to make sure that people get the right care at the right time. And we have to have a mechanism like Alex has talked about, get them out the street, get them into a bed, get them into a heart hub, get them into long-term treatment, support them in a supportive environment, and hopefully transition them into independence. And I think that that's the pathway that we need to put forward.
How are these conversations happening with the province right now? Like, have you heard back on them? Like, at what stage these consultations on, especially mental health, compulsory treatment?
I think that, and Dan, if it's okay if I jump in,
Yeah.
I think that the conversation's ongoing, right? Like what we've seen is that we appealed for about 10 different things. We got, I would say, 7 of them. There were 3 that were being pushed back, and the compassion intervention and the funding for the sufficient rehab facilities and how that works. That's we're not there yet. It doesn't mean there's been no funding in rehab, because I don't want to paint a false picture. There has been funding in rehab, but not to the capacity that is needed yet. And I think it's really interesting where we are right now. Like, I went to Vancouver on Friday, and I came back, and Dan, you and I haven't had a chance to catch up since then, but it was Thursday, not Friday. I'm lying to you now. Came back on Thursday, and I was incredibly surprised at how conservative the approach is out on the West Coast. Like, we would have got called right-wing extremists 4 years ago to say that we would like mandatory care, compassionate intervention. And the government of BC, which is a NDP government, has compassionate intervention. When I landed in Toronto, I got told, hey, we'll pay attention tomorrow, which being Friday. And you had Premier Canoe come out and say he is pushing now compassionate intervention, mandatory care inside of Manitoba. And so these are not right-wing governments. They're governments that care about the individuals who are going through these issues, and they care enough to say, we're going to do something about this. And so I think the issue in Ontario is we are so much larger than these other places. I mean, like, look at Manitoba versus Ontario. I don't know how many people are in Manitoba. I'm guessing a couple million. I'm off? No?
Yeah, there
I wouldn't know.
there isn't. I
Brian,
don't believe
around there?
you're close enough.
Yeah. We're 15, 16, 17 million in Ontario, depending on whether people fill out the census data or not, right? So it's just not as easy to deal with when you're on the magnitude of population that we have. But I think that one of the things that we need to continue to do is to get that answer. Is like we need to go after the answer of yes, and we need to understand what the costs are. Like, Dan, do you know what the costs are?
In regards to implementing all these things we were talking about,
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
What I do know is I can tell you what an overdose cost me, and to do an overdose and to take somebody up to the hospital is over $4,000 every single time. By the way, in 2024, we had 529 calls for service. Now start doing the math.
Not cheap.
It's astronomical. The cost factors, and this is what we've been trying to do, is put an economic argument together to be able to show that this investment and this strategy is a better use of taxpayers' dollars than what we're doing right now. And we believe in our heart of hearts that we'll have better outcomes. And I think that that's what we're trying to achieve for the government. We don't care who the government is. We just want to be able to make sure that we have better outcomes than we're having right now. And
So
I
for
think
both of
that's,
you, right? Oh, sorry. Finish then.
no, go ahead, Barbara. Sorry.
I just want to know, like, for both of you guys, like, we're in November now, almost finishing the year. Any expectations at all? Like, anything else that you think will be done this year?
Absolutely. I mean, you have to understand I'm an optimist anyway, so I always am. I'm meeting with the Premier on December 3rd in his office, and I'm looking for a very robust, spirited conversation, and he knows the passion that goes behind me because I have the opportunity to continue to connect with him. So he knows that I am going to come well prepared and ready to go, and I continue to do this what I can do. But I'm always optimistic. I honestly believe in my heart of hearts, and this is just my opinion. I think everybody understands the complexities and how hard this is. I think where the fear factor comes is what do we need to do and what do we need to do right now? And I think that that's where municipalities, or even Alex and myself, OBCM, that we represent such a large portion of the population, can actually be really good resources for the government to be able to bring programs forward and say, okay, Alex, what worked there and where were the missing components and what did you learn out of it and how do you see it? And Dan, what's working there? And Jen, what's working there? I think that that's where I would really love to see more of that communication through the health department, through the ministry or the associate minister of mental health and addiction. It's just my desire. And I think we have a lot to add to the conversation. And we want to see people get better, but we want to see the government succeed at one of the most complex health issues around.
And
Let me
Alex,
ask you guys a quick question, though, from the other side of this. Like, where do you stand, Mayor Carter, Mayor Nuttall, where do you see Safe Supply playing a role, or if at all, in any of this?
So I'm going to jump on this right away. I'm recovery based, and I don't support it. And I'll tell you why is because, in my opinion, I know as one of the best addicts around that the only pathway forward is through a full recovery program. That's where I stand. I've been very vocal about that. And that's just how I feel. I have to use my experience and all that I've learned over the last 34 years of my sobriety about what works and what doesn't work. And so that's the reason why I take that position.
What about
Look,
you?
I'm not going to be able to say anything more than Dan does on this. Only piece I would add is, gone are the days when we have governments that are trying to create safe supply vending machines, as you saw on the downtown east side of Vancouver. It was absolutely ridiculous. Like, if you want, there's just nothing safe about putting these things in your body. Like, it's just not safe. It's like the same argument that we hear on safe injection sites. Sorry, they're not. If there was a safety related to this action, you wouldn't have to be around a doctor in case you died while you're doing it. And so it's like, if those facilities are done the right way in a position where it's overseen by a doctor to remove the person's addiction and to help them get past the addiction, or at least cope with the addiction, and maybe is a better way to put it, then you can see a potential for success. But when we are talking about safe supply and like unmitigated numbers of injection sites without any sort of rehab or oversight from doctors to be able to help them move down and progress towards a life where the addiction's no longer controlling the life, it's just never going to work.
Right. Where do you, like, do you see, like, I know they're having consultations and talks and meetings about all that. And I'm just curious, you said that you're just cleaning the last remaining tents in your encampment in Barrie. But I guess, like, from both of you, I would like to hear, like, where do you expect to be in a year from now? Like, like, do you feel like, what's your vision for everything that's happening right now?
You know what? I think you used a very, very important word there for mayors, and that word is vision. And if you don't have the vision for your city being a safe city and a clean city and a city where people can get help and support, and your vision for your city is that those folks can go to that forest and those folks can go to that, park, and those folks can go to that side of the road, boulevard of a road, then you're going to have issues. I'm not going to pretend that we're not going to have any issues, but the vision that we're following or moving towards is one where we don't have tents in the city of Barrie, and it's one where we help people get into supports. They get surrounded by people who want them to succeed instead of being surrounded by drug dealers who want them to live in that life of languish. I think what you'll see in Barrie is there will be periodic flares up of tents in places, but they'll be immediately met. And that's just what Dan Carter's been doing in Oshawa. And certainly we're going to be following through on the same here.
Mayor Carter, any thoughts?
Well, I think Alex said it beautifully, to be absolutely honest, but I agree. I just find it inhumane that anybody is in a tent. I used this at a time we were in Ottawa talking at OBCM. And I said, we're going to go back to our hotel rooms and somebody's going to turn on the TV and they're going to say for $1 a day, you can save somebody's life because they don't have enough food. They don't have fresh water. They have no sanitation. They have, they have airborne disease and all the rest. And I said to the group, so what's the difference? Like, what's the difference? There's not clean water. They're unsafe. We know that they have the highest rate of death. There's airborne diseases. There's Lyme disease. There's West Nile. Alex has had an experience in regards to just the toxicity of the soil and the water around it. At some point, we've just got to say, like, this is unacceptable. So I love what Alex said. I think we have to have a vision of what does the future look like? What are we trying to accomplish and how are we going to accomplish it? And who's willing to stand in a difficult position? I want to remind everybody that Alex and myself stood with 17 other elected officials at a press conference at Queen's Park and stood there proudly to be able to say, we find it unacceptable people dying on our streets. And we're standing here as a group to say, we will not stop until people are supported and put into the right pathways of care because we find it unacceptable people dying on our streets. And I think that, that's what keeps pushing us and keeps on challenging us. But I'm proud of what Alex has done. And I shared this with Alex, and I hope Alex doesn't mind, but I was disappointed on all the news coverage. They only talked about, the individuals that were being displaced. They didn't talk to Alex about, so where are those people displaced going and why are you doing this? Because Alex has been very passionate about saying, I find it unacceptable that people are dying here. We should all find it unacceptable. That's why we intervened. That's why we're doing what we're doing.
What's the challenge? Why is it so hard for the province to step up on that? Like, what's the stigma around this?
I think it's resources. I think it's people knowing what kind of resources necessary, not just money, but also infrastructure that's necessary. If you remember, we looked at long-term care and said, holy smokes, we don't have enough long-term care beds. We got on that right away and expedited construction projects to start getting more long-term beds. I think we have to take the same approach. I think some people have a real challenge of seeing that this is a true health issue, and it is a health issue. And I think that that's where the difference. I always use this example of two people that are VSA. One is a guy that's 55 years old and had a heart attack, and one is 55 years old that had an overdose. We send them to the hospital, and the one individual that has an overdose aspect sits in the emergency room between 2 and 13 hours. The one that has a cardiac issue sees a doctor almost immediately. And by the way, if they need care and they don't have beds, which they don't have beds, they'll get on the phone, they'll fly them, they'll send them, they'll drive them to a hospital. On this individual that's addicted to opiates or had an overdose, we go, well, I'm sorry, we have no beds, so you have to leave. It's like, wait a second here. What's the difference?
Yeah.
So we have to understand this is a major health crisis that we're facing across this nation.
Just to wrap up, and I want to say thank you to both of you for your passion and your dedication to your community and your province on this. But just to wrap up, I'd love to get from each of you the number one thing, maybe top 2 or 3 things that you think that need to be done at the levels above you, whether it's provincial or federal. Like, what is the major ask? What are the things that can be done to help fix this?
Wow.
Yeah.
You couldn't make it a little bit more difficult, could you?
For me, I'm gonna
Why?
I'm going to double down on what we've already talked about, which is we need changes to the Mental Health Act. We need to be able to institute mandatory rehabilitation, compassionate intervention. And my third would be this, that there needs to be some bumpers. When you go bowling, and if you're like me, the ball ends up in the side of the lane instead of in the lane. There needs to be some bumpers put on our federal judges and the way that they are interpreting laws or just straight up writing bylaws for municipalities at the moment. They don't belong in this space, and they have made it more and more difficult for municipalities to be able to actually provide the help and support that we do have available locally. And so those would be the three things I'd ask for: is get the bumpers in place from a federal perspective, and make sure that we move forward on the reforms to the Mental Health Act and rehab.
Again, I have to agree with Alex, but I also getting the right care at the right time for the right reasons. I think there needs to be a commitment in regards to the infrastructure about the rehabilitation facilities that we need across the province, start building them. And we can't do either or, we have to do both. So that means, we have to look at how do we create these places where people can actually start getting the professional help that they need, and let's invest into that area. At the same time, we're going to need the supportive housing investment also at the same time. I think, along with what Alex has said, I think that would be a good starting point. And, again, we don't have to build 3,000 beds right away, but we could start building some beds that have this philosophy about long-term care instead of 21 or 28 days, and really give people a fair opportunity to recover. So I think for me, that kind of strategic investment in the infrastructure is really necessary on top of what Alex has talked about.
Brian and Barbara, can I know we're about to exit, but I just have a point here I want to
Of course,
make.
go ahead.
Yeah. Dan, how much you spend last year on your strategy with regards to homelessness and addictions? Just for Oshawa.
Just for Oshawa, because we're not directly responsible for health, social services, housing. We spent $6.5 million.
Wow.
Okay, so Oshawa spent $6.5 million last year. I am guessing the city of Barrie is going to far surpass that, because one of our cleanups, I think we got quoted $3.5 million. So it's going to be massive numbers. So, if you were to come to us and say, hey, and maybe we should talk about this. If you come to us and say, hey, we need you to contribute $10 million over 2 years or 3 years as we work through the most difficult parts of the cycle in order to get people into care, I think you'd all of a sudden get a bunch of municipalities saying, yeah, let's go. I think the province would be maybe more open to it, but we're spending massive amounts of dollars. I don't want to know what the city of Toronto's spending on it. Like, it's going to be $100 million they're spending a year on this. And so the idea, there you go. So if the idea is that we need 3,000 beds and it's $1,000 a day and there's 365 days in a year, it's basically like $1 billion in order to meet this. And perhaps what we need is, all of these levels of government, including us, I put the challenge out to us to actually come to the table with a plan that does all those things. It's not the municipal sector's responsibility to coordinate municipalities. It's actually the provincial governments. And it's not our perspective to be able to then go hold judges to account. That's the federal government. And so, we really do need buy-in from the senior levels, because they have willing partners here on the municipal level.
Yeah. And by the way, it's not going to be $1,000 a day. That's the other thing, right? Hospital beds went $1,100 a day. So we can do better than that. And I think that there is a financial equation there that can work for all. So
no, that's great, and I'm here to listen to you guys. But it really does make you wonder when, like, the vilification of Premier Smith and her government, and you read up on the 11 new centers that they're building so people can go and get 1 year treatment.
Yeah,
that they actually get movement on it, and some of the things that they're doing. And then you hear this, oh, it's these extreme right-wing kooks, but then you hear EB's doing it and Canoe it, and it does make you sit back and wonder. And I get your point earlier, Alex, that we have a larger population in Ontario, but it does seem like the province of Ontario has wavered between safe supply being the way to go about it to now not really sure exactly the direction they're going to take. And I think the leadership being shown by the mayors in Ontario have certainly helped move this issue forward. And I only hope that you and your colleagues can continue to show leadership on this, because I really think it's going to be a dedicated people like yourselves that are going to be needed to push the right topics on this and the right solutions. So I want to thank you both for taking the time to come in and talk to us about this important issue. And we will be following up with yourself and others on this topic.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. I hope you have a great day. And Alex, always great to see you. And thank you for going to Vancouver. Your investigation has paid dividends for a lot of us. So thank you.
Thank you, Dan. See you guys soon.
Thank you, guys.